Welcome to the Truth Injector World News Service. Today we are focused upon the pending UN admission of the State of Palestine to the world body. Palestine is currently fully recognized as a state by 123 nations worldwide. Many nations that do not yet recognize Palestine as a state have substantial majorities of their populations that support such recognition, including both the United States and the United Kingdom. Interestingly, many Israelis actually support the full recognition of Palestine as a state within the 1967 borders. In an effort to shine some light on this vitally important measure, we have a couple of video clips. The first one with Zbigniew Brzezinski at PBS and the other with President Jimmy Carter at the universally loved and supported Carter Center.
How do you see it?
I thought the president's speech, in a way, unintentionally signaled the fact that the U.S. role in the peace process is falling victim to our domestic politics, because his posture was one of kind of general encouragement for the peace process, but he didn't convey much sense of urgency. The contrast between his speech and Sarkozy's speech was really dramatic. The president's speech, first of all, dealt with the Palestinian issue in a much larger context, so he dealt with it very briefly. Sarkozy's speech was focused, and it conveyed a sense of genuine concern that if there is no progress towards peace soon, things will deteriorate, and that the parties to the conflict, both the Israelis and the Palestinians, need peace, deserve peace, but they have to be helped, actually helped from the outside to get that peace.
Do you think that there is an opportunity here out of what's this effort to come to the UN this week?
I think if we engage in some serious negotiations, I think perhaps there is an opportunity. But the United States will probably not be taking the lead. I suspect the Europeans will be taking the lead to a greater extent. I would be much happier if instead of threatening to veto the Palestinian resolution, we were prepared to offer an alternative resolution, our own or with our friends. And that resolution could make several very important but relevant points. One, it could endorse UN support, which goes back to the early, late part of the 1940s, support for an independent Jewish state, democratic Jewish state. Secondly, it could also indicate support for a democratic Palestinian state. Third, it could outline the framework for the peace negotiations, much in keeping with what Sarkozy was saying, and commit the parties, that is to say the Europeans, the Quartet, ourselves, to active role in that process. I think that would be much more constructive.
Well, Brzezinski, we've all raised this larger context. The president called it the remarkable year of the Arab Spring, but that's clearly brought some new complications to all this. Also, I mean, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the entire U.S. posture vis-a-vis the Mideast.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think what's happening in the Middle East is clearly a sea change in the direction of continued decline, accelerating decline, and eventually termination of the central role that the United States has been playing in that region since the end of World War II. We were welcomed into the Middle East by the Arabs because they saw in us a party that was not part of this imperial colonial tradition of the British and the French that were dominating the region. But over the last 50 years or so, they have become increasingly dismayed by our unwillingness to address seriously the problems, particularly arising out of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think this week may be decisive. If we don't recoup, I think we'll really be witnessing in the near future the end of the American role in the Middle East. And that will be disastrous for the United States in the first place, in the longer run for Israel. Look at the following simple fact. 30 years ago, we had good relations with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and Turkey, and they were our friends. Think of how much that has already changed. The implications of that are far-reaching.
Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who brokered peace between Israel and Egypt at Camp David, is weighing in on the Palestinian statehood issue. He says after 60 years, it's time for a Palestinian state.
Palestinians have a perfect legal right to do this. They're not violating any law of propriety or previous promise. And secondly, the United States has a right to veto if it wishes. I hope they won't, by the way. But if so, I don't know what will happen next. There'll be a debate or maybe a delay. But there's the option, of course, of the Palestinians then going to the General Assembly, where I think they'll get at least 130 or 140 votes out of 200, or perhaps more. And, of course, this will bring the issue to a focal point, and at least we'll get it off dead center.
Israel's prime minister says he is ready for direct talks with the Palestinians, but Carter says Israel is not serious about negotiating peace.
Not only has Netanyahu continued the long-time policy of Israel, that is to maintain control of the West Bank and Gaza, but they've added two more demands as prerequisites, you might say. First of all, that the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state. This is a new demand, and the Palestinians cannot accept this because about 1/4 of the total citizens of Israel are non-Jews. And secondly, Israel has also demanded as a new thing that they be permitted permanently to retain military forces in the Jordan River Valley, which is on the eastern border of Palestine. So these new proposals, plus Israel's demand to stay inside the West Bank and continue their settlement policies, obviously are prerequisites or demands by Israel that the Palestinians couldn't accept to start the talks.
As revolutions sweep the Arab world, Carter complains that U.S. credibility is at its lowest point in the Middle East in more than half a century, and a veto at the UN will not help. Jim Clancy, CNN Atlanta.